Hello, everyone. My name is Lisa Yaboa, the host for this webinar series, Now and Next, How the Church is Changing for Good, sponsored by Amplify Media. If you would like to watch any of our previous episodes, you can do so by logging on to amplifymedia.com/now-and-next. Or if you want to register for any of our future episodes, you can also register there and find all of our show notes where we will have resources and basically condense this conversation that we're going to have today. But we're going to launch right in. Today, we're going to engage the question, what does the ministry of hospitality look like for us as church leaders now that we're no longer able to meet together in physical spaces? And to help us anchor ourselves in that question, we have three wonderful panelists who are with us today. And so I'd love to introduce to you my dear friend, Hannah Bonner.
Hello, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
And Hannah, will you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you serve, and how you are in ministry and hospitality and also social justice?
Absolutely. I live right now in my house all the time here in Tucson, Arizona. I work as the director of the Frontera Wesley, which is, I think, the closest Wesley Foundation to our southern border here at the University of Arizona in Tucson, as well as our community college, Pima Community College, that I serve. And I am living a very busy life these days. As you know, young people are comfortable with technology. And so the pace has not slowed down for us. We have actually been adding a lot of activity. And so I'm living a busy little life here in my house and trying to figure out how do we continue to be faithful here on the border.
Mm. We also have with us today Carol Howard Merritt. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and introduce our other guest. Oh, Carol, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes.
My internet, it's telling me that my internet connection's unstable. Sorry about that.
That's perfectly okay. Will you share a little bit about who you are, where you serve, and maybe the ways in which you come to this moment in regards to the ministry of hospitality?
Absolutely. I'm Carol Howard Merritt, and I'm a pastor and a writer, and right now I'm serving as an interim minister at First Presbyterian Church in New Canaan. Ministry of hospitality, especially when it comes online, has been something I've been doing for a really long time. It began when I needed to kind of connect to readers and figure out how to do that when I first wrote my first book. And so I began blogging and podcasting and doing social media on a regular basis. And I didn't know how much those skills would be so important in my pastoring work.
You know what we'll do? We'll go ahead and introduce our last guest, Debbie Nixon, and then we'll come back to you, Carol.
Greetings, Lisa, and to the panel. It's an honor to be with everyone today. I'm Debbie Nixon. I serve at the United Methodist Church of the Resurrection in Leawood, Kansas. We're a multi-site congregation with 5 locations in the Kansas City area. And now we have this new world that we're living in, and that is our online congregation. So hospitality has been such a key value at Church of the Resurrection from the very beginning. It's what captured my husband and I when we first started attending 30 years ago as nominally religious young people, and literally changed our lives. And so now, as someone who experienced it, we are now learning in this new world what it means to extend that in a digital world. And we've had to learn really quickly in the last 60 days.
I know we've all been thrust into a very new reality. I want to go ahead and begin our questions. And Carol, I'm certain that in the midst of answering these questions, we'll get a better sense of the context that you are a part of, that you can kind of share more about your world and ministry. You know, when we typically think of hospitality, we think about in-person gatherings. I mean, the very nature of the church is to be bodily, to be incarnational. In what ways have your churches or your context where you serve, have you translated your practices of hospitality online? So how are you being incarnational, though doing so online, like just showing how you were hospitable?
I know a lot of congregations are wrestling with the idea of sacraments and how to have those online. And I'm Presbyterian, and so we have been able to do that in different ways with different in different areas of the country. But one of the things that we have done is we have definitely had communion. And even last week we had a baptism. We had someone who was going into surgery. It was life-threatening, and they really felt like they really wanted to be baptized. And it was an adult baptism. So what happened was she had a 4-year-old daughter who ended up giving pouring the water on her. And it was very moving, very touching. I know that some churches aren't able to do that, and people are celebrating sacraments in different ways, but I was really glad that we were able to celebrate with her.
Debbie and Hannah, any other ways in which you feel like your community's practices of hospitality have translated online?
I love what Carol's describing, because what she is talking about is this way that we're inviting people into the experience. And what we've recognized in that, we've been doing online worship at Church of the Resurrection for more than a decade now. But this has been a realization for us that really it was that we were hosting in-person gatherings, and we allowed others online to peer into what it was that we were doing in person. And so what does this new world begin to look like now when we become an online church that hosts in-person gatherings? And so ways that we've made changes already is making certain that people are invited into the experience from the very beginning. And so we talk about the fact that you're going to see the candles lit on our altar as a reminder of Christ's presence here in this space. And we invite you now to light a candle in your space that unites all of us that are worshiping together in this moment. And so it's giving those kind of instructions and thinking about things that might take people out of the experience. And so as we begin to re-enter and think about in-person gathering again, the meet and greet time, well, those that were online were excluded from that. They were aware then at that time that they were not a part of the experience. And so those are shifts for us that I think you're going to begin to see a major change in the ways that we make certain that no one is excluded from the experience. And again, just Carol's analogy of this child with this water and this moment that they have. We're also doing online communion with the blessing of our bishops. And so again, how do we translate those things so that everyone sees themselves as the body of Christ connected now virtually together?
Yeah.
So my world is a little bit different with college students. When we talk about college students, I tell people that they have Facebook, but they use Instagram and they live on Snapchat and TikTok. And so ways of connecting with them during this time period look like adapting to all that, and particularly empowering and delegating those that are most fluent with the forms of media that they use the most to be the front lines of hospitality. So that means I can make a great website. I can send a great email. I can do Facebook and the Instagram, and I delegate the further reaches of TikTok to the students. And so figuring out how to share our lives, because for my demographic, people are really longing for connection. They're longing for engagement. They're longing to be connected to an adult that's not their parents while they're at home. And so finding ways that we can invite one another into our lives. And so, for Mother's Day, we challenged students to take photos with their moms dressed up like they were going to church, since they weren't going to church, and actually attend a church service. And that was a way for them to see and feel like they were together and that they were still connected as a community. Also encourage them to go to church with their moms. So continuing to adapt the ways that they experience community, and continue to help them feel like we are still living life together. And this thriving, engaged group of young people is still thriving and is wanting to continue beyond the end of the school year, which is when we usually stop and just keep going through the summer because they need that connection.
Mm-hmm. Actually, just from your the ways in which you've answered this, you all have even kind of convicted me a little bit when I think about how the language that I use for our Sunday morning worship services that are pre-recorded. We typically on a Sunday when we would gather would say that we don't have visitors who ever meet with us. Everyone's always an honored guest. And just that I remember to use that language for the new people who might watch our services, that they would understand our culture of welcome, even based on the language that we use in the midst of our services. And it seems like the ways in which you're engaging online says something about the ethos of your community, like the ways in which you actually invite people to be present among you. This kind of digital platform, online worship for the church has allowed us to have a really wide net. We are actually touching people or engaging people that we would not have otherwise if we expected them to maybe park in our parking lots and sit in our pews. What are some ways that we can engage those new guests who meet us online, and then maybe even to help them get deeper into our community? So not just the one touch, but really being kind of going deep with the communities that we serve.
We are continuing to deploy our practices for visitor follow-up as vigorously as we did when it was in-person gathering. So we're still inviting everyone who's worshiping online with us to, we want to know that you're here. Let's see who all is worshiping together. If you'll take a moment now and let us know that you're here, very simply, it's cor.org here. And then we make it easy for them to give us their name and their email addresses and any other information that they might be willing to provide. And then from there, we're able to use that information to begin to communicate with them. Mm-hmm. So within that day, using Text in Church, and many of you may be familiar with it, but if you're not, it is a service that you may want to take a look at. And through Text in Church, we text them immediately. And I've talked to people that are starting to get these texts, and they think it's just a one-time thing. And then what happens when we deploy this kind of radical or biblical hospitality is we surprise them, because then there's a second follow-up. Mm. And on Tuesday, after a weekend of worship, they get a personal email from our senior pastor, Pastor Adam, who just lets them know, hey, I'm glad that you worshiped with us. Love to connect with you more. Here are a few next steps. And then on Saturday, we text them or email them again to remind them that it's the weekend and invite them back into worship. And there are 7 different touches that we make within their first month. And I was speaking with a woman the other day who had visited for her first time, and again, thought that this was only going to happen the one time. And then when the second touch came and the third touch came, and she told me, I feel like I have a friend now. I feel like somebody at your church knows my name, and I know their name. And I think that's what hospitality does, is it makes us relational with one another. And we have found that this is something that we can do even in this virtual world that we're living in now.
I love that.
I just wanted to follow up with what Debbie said, because I think that this time period can really be an opportunity for a lot of churches to shift our expectations around how people engage with us. I think that as a young clergy person, I've often felt frustrated with the kind of thought of, well, we are here. Why aren't the young people coming? And it's because they operate differently, and they want to be invited, and not just invited, but invited on a continual basis. And so the whole concept of like, well, our church exists and we have a sign out front that says when our services are is sufficient. Obviously, we're all being forced to adapt to a new reality where we have to make sure that people know and are informed about how to join us in the ways that we are joining, which raises the engagement. And so I think it's a great opportunity to shift our paradigm. For me, I am reminding my students about everything. So many reminders are going out every day, and that matters to them. Even for those, I've been told by those that don't show up for one reason or another, but that they continue to get the invitation makes them continue to feel connected to the community. Mm-hmm. And so I think that I also would say, like, don't be annoying, but don't take a no response as rejection all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it seems like right now we have this new opportunity where we've gone from expecting everybody to come into the doors because we have that sign outside to actually being where they are. And, if people are hanging out on Facebook, what a beautiful thing that now we're there too. And we're able to engage people in the place where they are. And we found, as many churches have, that we've been able to engage with people all over the United States and reconnect with people who have grown farther away from the church.
Carol, can you hear me?
Has been able to go to church together for the first time in 30 years. So personally, that's been really wonderful.
You all just made me think of another question, and that is, do you think people's threshold has changed for invitations? Hannah, it was something that you said in particular that kind of made me wonder, now that people have been sheltering in place, if they have a higher threshold for our connection or connecting with people.
In my case, I would say definitely. I think and I'm very careful about timing. Letting people know. There's like two parts of the invitation. One is letting people know well in advance, so that they can be ready. And the second is reminding them shortly before it's about to happen. Because as we are sitting in our homes, we're all losing track of what day it is and what time it is. And so I think I never would have done like a double bump like that before with my young folks. But now they need that because they don't know what time it is, and they're in different time zones. And so I think that definitely there's a raised tolerance for it as people are feeling more isolated and there's less going on in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing that we're discovering too is that people are craving to have that communication, and it's varying the communication. And Hannah has so articulately begun to cast that vision of what that looks like. And so it's not always an invitation to worship, mm-hmm. but this invitation is to, what does it mean to be the church? What does it mean to love your neighbor in your community? And so sharing ideas on ways that you can do that, and then deploying different methods of ways to reach people. And so whether, at this point right now, we offer Tuesday night Vesper service. It's 15 minutes, but it's another opportunity for people to engage together in community. Mm-hmm. Our pastors and our staff, as well as some of our really committed volunteers, are scheduling coffee meetings with congregants so they can sign up as if it was an appointment, and people just share coffee and conversation together. Then also creating, of course, small groups virtually. And we're trying to launch new groups on a regular basis so that when someone is ready for that next step and they want to be a part of a 2 or 3 week class or a conversation, we're able to get them connected. And now we're able to do that so much more quickly. We don't have to wait for a room to open up. We've got leaders that are committing themselves and their time to leading those virtual groups with the desire and hope that, again, we're building community with people who've never met each other. And we're seeing a really large increase in the number of people that are selecting to be a part of that. And then other ways are inviting people to these pop-up service kind of experiences where they can show up in a social distancing and safe way to serve those within the community and make a difference. And if they don't live in Kansas City, then to provide suggestions and ways for them to do that with their neighbors in whatever city where they are located.
Debbie, that actually makes me kind of leads us to our next question, which is, what are some activities that maybe you've cultivated on this online platform that would translate well to when we're actually able to be physically present with one another?
Well, I'll start really quickly and just share that we recognize now that likely until there is a vaccine, we have to be intentional in creating in-person and virtual online experiences for our congregants. So we're looking now at what types of equipment we will need in our rooms that will continue so that groups can meet and they have a great view of everyone. It's not just the singular myopic view of the person who has the laptop. So we're looking to figure out what resource it's going to take to get 2 or 3 rooms, if you will, that are equipped to be able to host those kind of groups so that no one is excluded from the experience. We're finding that groups are really thriving using the Zoom technology or whatever technology and platform that they're using. They're women are hosting conversation groups, men hosting conversation group. All of our support groups are now online. We were really quick to get our support groups back in community online so that they could see one another and be together. And those are things that we anticipate that we will continue to invest in and not see it as the second tier or the second idea, but instead it's all looked as the holistic way in which we are living out our faith in Christ and our discipleship pathways together.
Yeah, I agree that we definitely need to create these spaces that are both online and in person. And for so many churches, it's going to be a huge stretch for the ministry staff, for the person who is the solo pastor who's trying to do this with their own technology and not a huge budget. So it's a particularly challenging time for a lot of pastors. One thing that I keep thinking that we need both online and when we come together now is like really some space to breathe and to hold all of this grief and this, all of this stuff we're carrying around right now. I just feel like there is so much going on in our culture and so much burden that we are bearing alone and isolated right now. And so I just feel that longing and that need to be together, to kind of hold all of this together.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think that one way that I've seen my students supporting each other in that is definitely something that I think would be great to continue beyond this. Is we're holding a lot of tension, grief, as Carol said, and also tension and anxiety in our bodies. I mean, anxiety is already an epidemic on college campuses. And so there's a lot of tension that folks are holding in their bodies. And one of my students has started a yoga movement. So she started doing yoga with anybody who would join her over Zoom. And, she got another group of young women to join her. And then she got me, I had been kind of halfway present all the time because I was usually like in a second Zoom call at the same time. But she got me to be fully present. And then now the young men are starting to come. And what we're all learning is that we need this. Our bodies need this. We are holding so much tension. And it's been amazingly healing and restorative for folks who never, ever would have tried something like, yoga for your neck tension, but now they're willing to try anything. And so I think both that specific thing that she's been leading is something I'd love to see continue, but also just the spirit of adventure and willingness to try things is something I'd like to see continue.
We're going to stop here and hear a little bit from our sponsor, Amplify Media. And when we come back, we'll get to hear more from our beautiful panelists. We'll see you in just a little bit.
Amplify is a space in which Christians can explore their faith more deeply in relationship with one another and be equipped to impact even more people for the gospel. You can even stream your church's services, bringing your congregation together even when they aren't in the same building. Engage your ministry and expand your mission by following these simple steps. Get started with Amplify today.
Well, we want to welcome you back with our three panelists. And as we talk about this gift of the ministry of hospitality, the question that I want to start us with is this. Hospitality is received and perceived in lots of different ways, depending on the context that we are serving and the people that we are serving. What are some ways that you actually honor different demographics with this ministry of hospitality during this season of COVID-19?
In our church, we're finding that there are people who may need medical supplies or medical medication or food or some of those very basic things. And so during phase one of this epidemic, we started to call everybody, especially those who are vulnerable, and making sure that they had that hospitality of food and of medication and those things that they needed actually in their home. So it's a different sort of hospitality. Instead of welcoming people in, making sure that they had the food that they needed on their table actually in their home. It's almost backwards, but and it was difficult a lot for our older population, and so just making sure that they were absolutely cared for, and not only with that, but and the depression that we know can be creeping in on people during this time.
We've also wanted to make certain that we maintain that high touch, and we know that people have different ways in which they desire for us to communicate with them. So we immediately, when this first started, prioritized our senior adults, those that we knew were either in care facilities that we'd so regularly visited and now weren't allowed to go in to see them anymore. We wanted to make certain that they knew that their church family still saw them, that we knew their names, that we cared. And so we began phone calling all of them immediately. We also now are recording services for them. We used to host them in our chapel during the week. They would bring the care buses to the church on a Friday. And so now we record a hymn sing, put that on an old-fashioned DVD and send that into the care facilities so that they can replay it then for the residents that had been used to coming to those services. So making certain that we have thought through ways of those kind of connections. As Carol said, running groceries, we've created through the phone call campaigns of checking in with all of our people, but also an online link that allows our congregants to let us know if they either have financial needs or they simply need supplies and they're not able to get out. They're in a vulnerable population, whether an autoimmune disease or an age. And so we will run and pick up grocery supplies. We made arrangements with local grocers to be able to take care of that for our congregants. So finding those different touches, and then handwritten notes. We're finding now that people actually of all ages they have more time and they actually enjoy getting something in the mail. And so we have now also taken the time to not only call all of our congregants, email all of our congregants, and this is visitors and members, and those who actually had become a little more disengaged, but now we have also taken the time to handwrite a personal letter, a personal card to every person that's on our database as well. So using all of those ways as ways to connect with people.
Beautiful. I serve, of course, with a younger population, but I also interact a lot with boards, the board for our building, the board for our ministry, various different entities. And so one of our folks is in his 80s, and as this began, we just really miss his face because he pops into the building, he pops by the offices, and I knew that I just wasn't going to make it through this without getting to see him. So what we ended up doing was actually teaching him how to video chat with us, and so he's in his later years of life, but he is willing to try things out, and so we ordered and sent him a webcam and walked him through setting it up. And it was really exciting that first time to see his face and his white beard pop up on the screen, and to be able to now see his face whenever we want. And the benefit of that is that his grandkids and his kids can see his face whenever they want to. And so I think that for us was a lesson that technology is not going to work for everybody, and we need to have other ways of connecting with them. And we need to think about who are we leaving out when our community is only happening through screens. But at the same time, we shouldn't underestimate our elders and the fact that some of them will adapt to this and will enjoy it. And so really enjoyed that with him. And I was wondering if I could teach you something that I taught him as he shows up for meetings. For our college students, pronouns are really important. It's an important part of hospitality. On college campuses, people introduce themselves with pronouns. So I'd say, my name is Hannah. I use she, her pronouns. I'm from Philadelphia, And so that's how they introduce themselves to one another. And so we've learned that on this online venue, a way of signaling to them, we see you and you are welcome. And that this space is also made for you, is by using our pronouns right on the screen. And so I taught Bruce how to do that, and I was wondering if I could teach y'all, so we can show up in meetings and at church in ways that help our young people to feel like we see them. So how we can do that is if you go to your name on your Zoom screen, and you right-click on it, or on a Mac, that's control-click, and you drag down, there's a menu that will pop up. It says Stop Video, Mute Video, Pin Video, and Rename. You're going to select Rename, and then you're just going to add your pronouns and change your name. You might not like how your name shows up, so you can change how your name is. I'm going to add my pronouns, and I'm also going to add my middle name, which I like to use, and rename. And so now the way that it pops up is that it has my name the way I like it to appear, and it also sends a signal to other people on the video call that I see them and they're welcome.
Thank you, Hannah. I've been telling people that I need to get a degree from Corona University because I've learned so many new things during the midst of the coronavirus. And so thank you for teaching us one more. But I do think that just the ways in which you all are very sensitive to what people need and how people understand what's hospitable for one demographic, though it may not necessarily feel inhospitable for another demographic. It may not feel like the fullness of hospitality for others. And just that we have to be contextual in the ways in which we care for people. This is an interesting question. Oftentimes when we think about the planning for ministries around hospitality, we engage care pastors or lay people and volunteers. How are you continuing community and small group connections among your members during this time?
We continue to use the online platform. So we use Zoom. And many of our hospitality teams, they would meet in huddle groups on Sunday mornings or Saturday evenings, depending on which service they were serving at, in groups. And so those huddles have continued throughout this. So those ushers and greeters and teams that were providing those kind of ministries through worship have that opportunity to be in connection, and we can use them now to get their ideas as we go forward. What are things that we're going to do differently when we do reopen the door to the church? The church never has closed. We've remained being the church, but when we reopen the door for in-person gathering, we're beginning to create guidelines now so that all those who enter the door feel safe and comfortable. And that's a part of the hospitality that we offer. So we're able to engage our volunteers that way. I know of some of our teams, our tech team, who actually one of our leaders has gone to each person's house and he knocks on the door and then he runs out to his car and is able to have a conversation with his teams that way. And he's visited all of his volunteers personally throughout this. I was thinking of another idea that I heard from a church, a 3-Point Church pastor, who knows that in her particular area and context, that she's not going to be able to get all of her congregants online. They either don't have access to the devices that connect them online or they don't have access to internet. And so what she's done is she has set up a conference call and provided numbers. Most of them have landlines or they're able to have a mobile phone and are able to call in, and they host their church services using a conference call link. And I just think that's a great and creative way of making certain that people feel connected together, and she can set those up so that they can also have those kind of conversations with one another.
So good.
I think we have discovered that what works in person really does not work. It doesn't feel the same. It doesn't work the same. And so one of the things we've done is, for instance, when we have a larger group gathering, I try to break them up into breakout rooms as much as possible. So that's, of course, when we're together in a space like this, and then taking that group and splitting it into small groups just within the large venue. So we're still meeting as small groups, still having the Bible studies, still having the other conversations. But even we are discovering when we gather as a large group, it helps them to have some breakout time as well, to not have the whole time period be everybody on the screen. And so there's even, what we're discovering, I would say, is that small groups are even more powerful and important during this time period than ever, because people want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want something more than just tuning in. And if we can provide those opportunities for them, this is really a time for us to step forward and be doing that as much as possible.
Yeah, I'm sadly, I hate to say it, but Zoom seems to be the answer to everything these days. And we're already hearing about Zoom exhaustion. So I'm, really open to other things that we're doing, other churches are doing. But we've been trying to figure out different ways that people will connect. So first we tried 6 weeks of education, and sometimes people would come, sometimes they wouldn't. They would usually watch it later online. Then we tried game nights. And then finally we just said, okay, we're going to all meet and just hang out. And that seemed to be the sweet spot. Like, people didn't want to learn anything. They didn't want to even have a game. They just wanted to hang out. So we just provide space for people to hang out now. And again, if it gets too big, we can split it up. In Zoom, you can split people up into different groups. But it's just been a really nice opportunity for us to just chat with each other and reconnect. So we, of course, have a coffee hour after our service, but we just needed that midweek check-in as well.
If you don't mind, Lisa, I just wanted to follow that up by just saying, like, I love what Carol said, because it's about, don't force things. Like, just be flexible, go with what works, go with what's working for people, because they will let you know what they need by their engagement. And so if something's not working, you move in the direction of engagement, move in the direction of what is working for them, listen to them and to what they need during this time period. So, yeah.
Carol, you started our time together talking about, celebrating this baptism within your community. And I think those moments remind us that life persists even in the midst of COVID-19. People are still getting engaged and married. People are having children. People are also losing family members and friends. And so we're all trying to hold joy and sorrow, though we're not always able to do it in the same rooms. What are ways that we can celebrate together and also lament together while we're having to try to provide hospitality to each other, but doing so physically distant?
Some of the things that we've been trying to do is sending to a couple of restaurant owners who attend our congregation, who are a part of the congregation. And so we've been sending meals to each other, or making those phone calls. But, graduations are occurring, and people are supposed to be going off to college. And there are so many huge milestones that we're just trying to figure out how to celebrate. Do we drive by and honk our horns at their doors, or, we're just trying to figure out how to do this in different ways. But I think the thing is just making sure that we try in some way to keep those connections going.
That's so good.
I was going to say that celebration for our community is a big deal. We have a tradition that I bake a cake for the students on their birthday week, as for each student, which is means I'm baking a cake every week because the ministry has grown. And so I'm baking at least a cake a week during normal days. And so we've been trying to figure out, how do we do this? Celebration has been so important for us, giving somebody their day. And so recently, last week, one of our students, it was his birthday, it was his time. And so he's a big sports fan. And so we told everybody to dress up like an athlete or a sports fan, to like make a big deal about it and to bring their celebration visually to the screen that we couldn't share. And that made him feel really, really special. And of course, I baked something that I could share with the students that I deliver food to in his honor, and he appreciated that, even though he couldn't eat it himself. So we're finding ways to be silly and to bring celebration to our screens. I think that in terms of mourning, it is so hard, right? I took part in my first memorial service last week, and it really drained me. And what I'm finding with the students, with everything that they're losing and everything that they're grieving, because they are grieving, we've gone through moments where the world changed, right? This is their first one, and they're grieving a lot of things. And I found that what helps the most with them is just to sit in it, just not to say everything's going to be okay or distract them with something happier, but just, this is not cool. This is not fun, and it's going to last for a while, and that is really sad, and it bums me out too. And that seems to be what's most helpful is grieve with those that grieve, and celebrate with those that celebrate, and be with people as best as we can in the emotions that they're feeling, and not try to change what reality is.
Mm-hmm.
I love what Hannah, she's just describing the realness of all of this, and the ways then that we find that we're connected to one another. We want to be in relationship with one another, and that's what the church does. The church shows up in these unexpected ways, and so we had a funeral service this past week, a memorial interment for one of our longtime key members at Resurrection. And, we were limited to a maximum of 10 people who were able to be there. So 9 family members and our senior pastor who led the service in our memorial garden. But our parking lot was full of cars when they arrived. And it just happened spontaneously where people want to show their support for one another. And so they came and they sat in the parking lot with their lights on, with signs, and had put out signs so that when the family was walking in, just, and saying, "We love you, we're with you, we loved Paul." And seeing that with the college graduation parades, we had all of our college graduates, we scrolled their pictures following our worship service this week to honor them, but then also finding ways that we can share those kind of moments with them online as well. And I love the descriptions of what Hannah has given us too, this visual of ways that can be done. And that brings people together. But what I've loved about seeing what's happened in this time when it comes to hospitality is that the church always finds a way to show up when it's most needed. So we've been in hospital parking lots praying for people. And again, just showing our presence there by being there with those lights on or a sign that lets people know that we're there and we care.
Yeah. There's a beauty and a power to the hospitality that the people of God show. And so whether someone is going to write a handwritten note or someone's going to send a 15-second video or someone's going to drive past someone's house or someone's going to sit in the parking lot, at the end of the day, the essence of our hospitality can't be compromised. We have various ways that we're able to just say, God is love, and then God is also dwells within us to be a conduit of that love. Kind of speaking about kind of maybe the myriad of ways that we show hospitality. We have people within our communities who are gifted in regard to hospitality. What are ways that you are continuing to maybe pour into those who are gifted with the ministry of hospitality, and maybe even uncovering or discovering those individuals who in your community have the gift for the ministry of hospitality?
For us, none of our ideas are our own. And they come from our congregants or from others out in the community who contact us and say, "I've got this great idea. Can you show up at this hospital center today and bless them?" We did hospital meals for every hospital in the Kansas City area from our Easter offering. But that came from a congregant who contacted us and said, "I've got an idea. What would happen if we blessed local businesses who are now closed and have them make the meals? We'll pay them their rate to make the meals, and then we deliver those meals to all of the hospital workers." And so again, an idea that came organically, not from something that staff came up with, but instead an idea that came to us through a congregant. So I hope that we're finding ways to instill that in people, and that encourages them to share those ideas, and then we find the ways to make those possible with them.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I think, everything that we have started to do that's new, our programming has exploded since the beginning of all this. We're doing 2 or 3 times as much programming as usual. And all of that is coming from people's ideas of, I think people would really like this. I think people would really like that. And so it's saying, okay, well, lead it, invite people, see, so the new things that we are doing is each led by somebody, as Debbie said, listening to ideas and empowering people to carry them out. So we have somebody hosting, somebody wanted to do paint parties on Sunday afternoons where we would do art together. And so she hosts it, right? And so she's creating that space. She's responsible for what it feels like. And so that is definitely the exciting direction that we've been going as well.
When I think of ways to support hospitality volunteers, I know that like preaching fits into this somewhere. And for me, it's been like trying to figure out the right tone when it comes to preaching. And I'm hoping that as I preach and as other ministers on our staff preach, that we are able to get that tone of like understanding what's going on, talking about it, naming it, grieving, and also just showing incredible support and hope in the midst of it. It is such a time where people can feel isolated, and yet they're coming to worship to sort of hear those words of hope and to dispel that isolation and to feel supported in their own service and in their own hospitality as they reach out to others. And so I don't know that I hit it every week, but that's always my hope and my.
This has been so good. I want to ask one final question. You all have been beautiful practitioners of creating and cultivating spaces of welcome. And over the years of your experience, what's maybe the most creative or innovative way of creating space for welcome or hospitality that really resonates with you in this season?
I guess I want to say a couple of things. One of the wonderful things that I think this time has allowed for a lot of people is when people have been hurt by the church, or they have been rejected by one church and faith tradition, and they would like to try another. But it's super scary to walk into a congregation. I'm just so thankful for this time where we are opening up these spaces where people can feel safe, where you may not want to walk into a sanctuary, but you can get on a Zoom link, because if you slip out, it won't be that big of a deal. And so there are so many people who have been affected by church trauma or church hurt. And I've noticed during this time that we've been able to open up this little bit of space for them. And that's been just a really meaningful thing for me to watch. And then the second thing I wanted to bring up is I was asked to write a devotional on Julian of Norwich, and I'm really far behind on my deadline, terribly, but this has been just, I think I'm so far behind because there's so much to unpack. I've been reading and rereading her visions, and she just has so much wisdom for this moment and for this time. And so her creative experience has just been resonating on a very deep level now. As many of you know, she wrote her visions during the plague after experiencing 3 days of real, almost a near-death experience. And so that's just been incredibly life-giving to read her words.
Julian, we love Julian.
Hashtag lots of love for Julian.
Yes, write that book. We need it. Mine might be a little peculiar, but it's truly what's been coming to mind for me, which is that I learned to create community through a camera in front of the Waller County Jail, which is where I held vigil for 3 months after the death of Sandra Bland in that place. And it was a space where we were creating community, helping people to hear her voice, but also inviting people to come and take a stand physically, but also all around the world, people were feeling like they were present, like they were there through the videos that we ended up posting for every day for years. And so I think that what really has been standing out to me during this time is that the ability that I have to create community for my students came from that time period of forcing myself to do something that I'm an introvert. I don't naturally like to be in front of a camera. I did tech when I was in high school, so I was behind the scenes. I avoid being in front of people, but the calling keeps bringing us out, right? And so I learned how to create community in front of a camera during that time because lives depended on it. And now lives depend upon it in a different way, right? Our well-being and our sense of connection to one another. And so I think that it reminds me, I feel the need to say that because I need to give credit where credit's due to the movement, to the people. And I think that it also helps us to be cognizant of the ways that we have the risk of creating communities in a way that doesn't listen to all the voices. And so my students are always reminding me about that. And, I'm so glad to hear them talk to me about how are we creating ways for people to hear the voice of disabled folks in our community? How are we saying the names of Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery so that people know that we're still trying to be in solidarity, even if we can't physically show up? How are we sending that kind of welcome as well to all the folks that we are committed to being in community with? And so that's what I've been reflecting upon.
That's good.
I think as I listen to Hannah and Carol, the theme in all of this is this way that we're united around this kingdom vision and this kingdom mission. And that's what I have seen. I don't know that it's creative, Lisa, when I hear your question of what's the most creative thing you've learned during this time. For me, when I hear that question, the thing that continues to resonate with me is an awareness of how important our personal connections and our personal relationships are, and that we're wired that way, that Jesus came and modeled for us what it means to be fully present with people in all situations. And the church certainly could have gone silent and said, well, we can't be in our buildings right now, so we'll take a little bit of a break. But immediately, because we're so united around this kingdom-minded vision, we began to say, what can we do to stay in relationship with people and build new relationships and bridges in ways that we'd never dreamed before? And it just seems as if the opportunities have just sprung wide open for us. And that's what I'm beginning to see, is that when you unite people around a common cause, which Hannah, as you're describing, too, around these social justice causes or meeting the needs in the community by having people unite around pop-up food drives or prayer drives or putting signs out at local businesses. As a result of that, they recognize that they're an extension of the light of Christ out into the world, and that's what our hospitality looks like. And so for me, it's not as creative, but an affirmation of how relational and how personal we must be, and keep that at the forefront of everything that we do.
I want to thank our panelists, Carol, Debbie, and Hannah, for the ways in which you've held space for one another in this conversation and have shown us the fullness of hospitality in this particular moment. We do hope that for those of you who have been watching these webinars, that you will join us as we continue with the next portion. What will it look like? Not just the now, but the next, with our last two webinars, one that will talk about our digital future as the church, this kind of both and of understanding our in-person gatherings, but now we've kind of unlocked this digital platform that allows us to connect with a wide array of people. And then secondly, on Thursday, we will have our last conversation, which will be about this homecoming. What will it look like? How can we imagine when those who are part of the church are able to be with one another again? You can register at amplifymedia.com/now&next for those upcoming webinars, and also to get the wonderful notes that have come out of this conversation. We do look forward to seeing you again.